Chapter 5 of The Bird's Christmas Carol. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Bird's Christmas Carol by Kate Douglas Wiggin. Chapter 5. Some Other Birds Are Taught to Fly. Before the earliest Ruggles could wait and toot his 5-cent tin horn, Mrs. Ruggles was up and stirring about the house, for it was a gala day in the family. Gala day! I should think so. Were not her 9 children invited to a dinner party at the great house, and weren't they going to sit down free and equal with the mightiest in the land? She had been preparing for this grand occasion ever since the receipt of the invitation, which, by the way, had been speedily enshrined in an old photograph frame and hung under the looking-glass in the most prominent place in the kitchen, where it stared the occasional visitor directly in the eye, and made him pale with envy. Bird's Nest, December 17, 1880. Dear Mrs. Ruggles, I am going to have a dinner party on Christmas Day, and would like to have all your children come. I want them every one, please, from Sarah Maud to baby Larry. Mama says dinner will be at 5:30, and the Christmas tree at 7, so you may expect them home at 9 o'clock. Wishing you a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I am, yours truly, Carol Bird. Breakfast was on the table promptly at 7 o'clock, and there was very little of it, too, for it was an excellent day for short rations, though Mrs. Ruggles heaved a sigh as she reflected that even the boys, with their India-rubber stomachs, would be just as hungry the day after the dinner party as if they had never had any at all. As soon as the scanty meal was over, she announced the plan of the campaign. "Now, Susan, you and Kitty wash up the dishes, and Peter, can't you spread up the beds, so I can get ter cutting out Larry's new suit? I ain't satisfied with his clothes, and I thought in the night of a way to make him a dress out of my old plaid shawl, kind of Scotch style, yer know. You boys clear out from underfoot. Clem, you and Con hop into bed with Larry while I wash your underflannins. 'Twon't take long to dry 'em. Sarah Maud, I think 'twould be perfectly handsome if you ripped them brass buttons off your uncle's policeman's coat and sewed 'em in a row up the front o' your green skirt. Susan, you must iron out yours and Kitty's aprons. And there, I can mighty near forgettin' Peory's stockings. I counted the whole lot last night when I was washin' of 'em, and there ain't but 19. Anyhow, you're fix 'em, and no 9 pairs mates nohow, and I ain't goin' ter have my children wearin' odd stockings to a dinner company, brought up as I was. Ely, can't you run out and ask Miss Cullen ter lend me a pair o' stockings for Peory, and tell her if she will, Peory'll give Jim half her candy when she gets home. Won't yer, Peory?" Peoria was young and greedy, and thought the remedy so much worse than the disease that she set up a deafening howl at the projected bargain, a howl so rebellious and so out of all season that her mother started in her direction with flashing eye and uplifted hand. But she let it fall suddenly, saying, "No, I won't lick your Christmas Day, if yer drive me crazy, but speak up smart, now, and say whether yer'd rather give Tim Cullen half your candy or go bare-legged ter the party." The matter being put so plainly, Peoria collected her faculties, dried her tears, and chose the lesser evil, Clem having hastened the decision by an affectionate wink. That meant he'd go halves with her on his candy. "That's a lady!" cried her mother. "Now, you young ones that ain't doin' nothin', play all yer want ter before noontime, for after ye git through eatin' at 12 o'clock, me and Sarah Maud's goin' ter give yer such a washin' and combin' and dressin' as yer never had before, and never will again, and then I'm goin' to set yer down and give you 2 solid hours' trainin' in manners, and 'twon't be no foolin' neither." "All we've got to do's go eat," grumbled Peter. "Well, that's enough," responded his mother. "There's more'n one way of eatin', let me tell yer, and you've got a heap to learn about it, Peter Ruggles. Lord sakes, I wish you children could see the way I was fetched up to eat. Never took a meal o' vittles in the kitchen before I married Ruggles, but yer can't keep up that style with 9 young ones, and yer pa always off ter sea." The big Ruggleses worked so well, and the little Ruggleses kept from underfoot so successfully, that by 1 o'clock 9 complete toilets were laid out in solemn grandeur on the beds. I say complete, but I do not know whether they would be called so in the best society. The law of compensation had been well applied. He that had necktie had no cuffs, she that had sash had no handkerchief, and vice versa. But they all had boots and a certain amount of clothing, such as it was, the outside layer being in every case quite above criticism. "Now, Sarah Maud," said Mrs. Ruggles, her face shining with excitement, "everything is redd up, and we can begin. I've got a boiler and a kettle and a pot of hot water. Peter, you go into the back bedroom, and I'll take Susan, Kitty, Peory, and Cornelius. And Sarah Maud, you take Clem and Ely and Larry, one at a time, and get as fur as you can with 'em, and then I'll finish 'em off while you do yourself." Sarah Maud couldn't have scrubbed with any more decision and force if she had been doing floors, and the little Ruggleses bore it bravely, not from natural heroism, but for the joy that was set before them. Not being satisfied, however, with the tone of their complexions, she wound up operations by applying a little Bristol brick from the knife board, which served as the proverbial last straw, from under which the little Ruggleses issued rather red and raw and out of temper. When the clock struck 3, they were all clothed, and most of them in their right minds, ready for those last touches that always took the most time. Kitty's red hair was curled in 34 ringlets, Sarah Maud's was braided in 1 pigtail, and Susan's and Ely's in 2 braids apiece, while Peoria's resisted all advances in the shape of hair oils and stuck out straight on all sides, like that of the Circassian girl of the circus, so Clem said, and he was sent into the bedroom for it too, for whence he was dragged out forgivingly by Peoria herself 5 minutes later. Then, exciting moment, came linen collars for some, and neckties and bows for others, and, eureka! The Ruggleses were dressed, and Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. A row of seats was formed directly through the middle of the kitchen. There were not quite enough chairs for 10, since the family had rarely all wanted to sit down at once, somebody always being out or in bed, but the wood box and the coal hod finished out the line nicely. The children took their places according to age, Sarah Maud at the head and Larry on the coal hod, and Mrs. Ruggles seated herself in front, surveying them proudly as she wiped the sweat of honest toil from her brow. "Well," she exclaimed, "if I do say so as shouldn't, I never see a cleaner, more stylish mess of children in my life. I do wish Ruggles could look at ye for a minute. Now I've often told you what kind of family the McGrills was. I've got some reason to be proud. Your uncle is on the police force of New York City. You can take up the newspaper most any day and see his name printed right out, James McGrill, and I can't have my children fetched up common, like some folks. When they go out and they've got to have clothes and learn to act decent. Now I want to see how you're going to behave when you get there tonight. Let's start at the beginning and act out the whole business. Pile into the bedroom there, every last one of you, and show me how you're going to go into the parlor. This'll be the parlor, and I'll be Miss Bird." The youngsters hustled into the next room in high glee, and Mrs. Ruggles drew herself in her chair with an infinitely haughty and purse-proud expression that much better suited a descendant of the McGrills than modest Mrs. Bird. The bedroom was small, and there was presently ensued such a clatter that you would have thought a herd of wild cattle had broken loose. The door opened, and they straggled in, all the little ones giggling, with Sarah Maud at the head, looking as if she had been caught in the act of stealing sheep, while Larry, being last in line, seemed to think the door a sort of gate of heaven which would be shut in his face if he didn't get there in time. Accordingly, he struggled ahead of his elders and disgraced himself by tumbling in head foremost. Mrs. Ruggles looked severe. "There, I knew you'd do some such fool way. Try it again, and if Larry can't come in on 2 legs, he can stay ter home." The matter began to assume a graver aspect. The little Ruggleses stopped giggling and backed into the bedroom, issuing presently with lockstep, Indian file, a scared and hunted expression in every countenance. "No, no, no!" cried Mrs. Ruggles in despair. "You look for all the world like a gang o' prisoners. There ain't no style ter that. Spread out more, can't yer, and act kind o' careless like. Nobody's goin' to kill ye." The third time brought deserved success, and the pupils took their seats in the row. "Now yer know," said Mrs. Ruggles, "there ain't enough decent hats to go round, and if there was, I dunno, so I'd let yer wear 'em, for the boys would never think to take 'em off when they got inside, but anyhow, there ain't enough good ones. Now, look me in the eye. You needn't wear no hats, none of yer. And when you git int the parlor, and they ask you for ter lay off yer hats, Sarah Maud must speak up and say it was sech a pleasant evenin' and sech a short walk that you left yer hats to home to save trouble. Now can you remember?" All the little Ruggleses shouted, "Yes, marm," in chorus. "What have you got ter do with it?" demanded their mother. "Did I tell you to say it? Wasn't I talkin' to Sarah Maud?" The little Ruggleses hung their diminished heads. "Yes, marm," they piped more feebly. "Now git up, all of ye, and try it. Speak up, Sarah Maud." Sarah Maud's tongue clove to the roof of her mouth. "Quick! Ma thought it was such a pleasant hat that we'd better leave our short walk to home," recited Sarah Maud in an agony of mental effort. This was too much for the boys. "Oh, whatever shall I do with ye?" moaned the unhappy mother. "I suppose I've got to learn it to yer," which she did, word for word, until Sarah Maud thought she could stand on her head and say it backwards. "Now, Cornelius, what are you goin' ter say to make yourself good company?" "Dunno," said Cornelius, turning pale. "Well, you ain't goin' to set there like a bump on a log 'thout sayin' a word ter pay for yer vittles, air ye? Ask Mis' Bird how she's feelin' this evenin', and if Mr. Bird's havin' a busy season, or somethin' like that. Now we'll make believe we've got ter the dinner. That won't be so hard, 'cause yer'll have somethin' to do. It's awful bothersome ter stand around and act stylish. If they have napkins, Sarah Maud down to Peory may put 'em in their laps, and the rest of you can tuck 'em in your necks. Don't eat with your fingers, don't grab no vittles off one 'nother's plates. Don't reach out for nothin', but wait till you're asked, and if you never get asked, don't get up and grab it. Don't spill nothin' on the tablecloth, or like's not Mis' Bird'll send yer away from the table. Now we'll try a few things ter see how they'll go. Mr. Clement, do you eat cranberry sarse?" "Bet your life!" cried Clem, who, not having taken in the idea exactly, had mistaken this for an ordinary family question. "Clement Ruggles, do you mean to tell me you'd say that to a dinner party? I'll give yer one more chance. Mr. Clement, will you take some of the cranberry?" "Yes, marm, thank ye kindly, if you happen ter have any handy." "Very good indeed. Mr. Peter, do you speak for white or dark meat?" "I ain't particular as ter color. Anything that nobody else won't will suit me," answered Peter with his best air. "First rate. Nobody could speak more genteel than that. Miss Kitty, will you have hard or soft sarse with your puddin'?" "A little of both, if you please, and I'm much obliged," said Kitty with decided ease and grace, at which all the other Ruggleses pointed the finger of shame at her, and Peter grunted expressively, that their meaning might not be mistaken. "You just stop your gruntin', Peter Ruggles. That was all right. I wish I could git it inter your heads that it ain't so much what yer say as the way yer say it. Ely, you and Larry's too little to train, so you just look at the rest, and do as they do, and the Lord have mercy on ye and help ye to act decent. Now is there anything more you'd like to practice?" "If you tell me one more thing I can't set up and eat," said Peter gloomily. "I'm so cram full o' manners now I'm ready ter bust 'thout no dinner at all." "Me too," chimed in Cornelius. "Well, I'm sorry for you both," rejoined Mrs. Ruggles sarcastically. "If the mountain o' manners you've got on hand now troubles ye, you're dreadful easy hurt. Now, Sarah Maud, after dinner, about once in so often you must say, 'I guess we'd better be goin',' and if they say, 'Oh no, set a while longer,' yer can stay. But if they don't say nothin', you've got ter git up and go. Can you remember? About once in so often." Could any words in the language be fraught with more terrible and wearing uncertainty? "Well," answered Sarah Maud mournfully, "seems as if this whole dinner party's set right square on top o' me. Maybe I could manage my own manners, but ter manage 9 mannerses is worse'n stayin' to home." "Oh, don't fret," said her mother good-naturedly. "I guess you'll git along. I wouldn't mind if folks would only say, 'Oh, children will be children,' but they won't. They'll say, 'Land o' goodness, who fetched them children up?' Now it's 5:15. You can go, and whatever yer do, don't forget your mother was a McGrill." End of Chapter 5.